Hello everybody. So, Zen Pinball 2 and now Pinball FX 3 have got to be my most played PlayStation, well 4 now, but PlayStation 3, 3DS, PlayStation Vita, Switch, Wii U, iPhone. Basically I've played this game or collection of pinball tables on every platform I can get my hands on. I really love them. So now that there's over 70 tables on the dot actually. Now that there's 70 tables, I thought I'd do a video kind of showing off my favourite 10, my 10 picks. If you were to go into Pinball FX3 or Zen Pinball 2 for the first time, these are the tables I'd recommend playing first. So enjoy the video, and if you're a pinball fan anyway, I hope you enjoy. So the first table that I'm showing off is Excalibur. Now Excalibur is one of the oldest. It's been, well, if not the oldest, I think it was one of the original Zen pinball tables way back when. And the reason I love it and still play it an awful lot to this day is that it's most like an actual pinball table. Every Zen pinball table has elements in it that would be impossible in a physical real-world pinball table. They use it to jazz up, I guess, the basic pinball action. But Excalibur is one of those tables that, with only a very small amount of modification, you'd actually be able to produce in the real world. And as somebody who spends a lot of time also playing real pinball whenever I get the chance to, having that is a really good experience. I really like the physics of Zen pinball more than some of the other studios like Farsight Studios reproduces all the classic pinball tables, but I'm not such a big fan of the physics engine that they use or the way that they present their games. I'm a big fan of the way Zen Studios does stuff. So to have a pinball table that plays like a real pinball table, but at the same time is, you know, Zen Studios in production values and physics engine and so on, is actually a really big draw card for me. So yes, I've been playing Excalibur for many years now, actually, and yeah, the Pinball FX3 version again I've been playing all over again. Getting some of the scores that I got on some of the other platforms is going to be an annoying challenge, but of course, me being me, I'm going to stick at it until I have a score that I believe is respectable. So yes, Excalibur, pinball table number 10 on my little countdown.
Tell me one thing.
Right, so next up is Aliens. Zen Studios released a pack of 3 tables based on the Aliens and Predator franchise. There's Aliens, which is this one, Aliens vs Predator, and Alien Isolation, which is a pinball table based on the video game, which also happens to be a really good game. I love them all, but the reason I've picked this one in particular is because, again, it's kind of my love of old pinball tables. This one looks like an older pinball table in terms of the aesthetic and the design of it. As you can see, the art is very 80s-ish, in, you know, keeping with the film as well, which is obviously from the 80s. So they've really created this 80s pinball vibe, which is really nostalgic for me. I played 80s pinball tables a lot whenever I got the chance. So yeah, obviously this one has some design elements that would be impossible on a real 80s pinball table. That massive alien in the background is a really impressive centerpiece for the table and is really used in some interesting ways. For some interesting quests and so on, you get some good points if you interact successfully with that alien, I can tell you. But other than that, the thing I really love about this table is the way that it really rewards very high precision play. Every pinball table obviously has ramps and bumpers and all that kind of stuff, but with this one in particular, if you're able to get into a flow where you keep hitting the ramps and the bumpers and you know, you do so quickly one after the other, you can rack up a huge score. So what you're seeing right here is me pulling out literally millions and millions and millions of points by hitting these ramps every single time I basically hit the ball. You get a slight window, I guess, as you just saw, to hit them sometimes, but yeah, it basically requires an awful lot of precision, and I like that about pinball tables. Obviously, the good thing about pinball when you play it well is the feeling you get of just, you know, absolutely nailing those kinds of the angles and getting the direction right and moving with the flow of the ball quite well. So that's a big part of the pinball experience. It's kind of like billiards or pool in that sense, and it's a similar kind of, I guess, mathematical problem to solve. And just as we finish this video shortly, I'll show you one of the missions. The other great thing about this pinball table is obviously because it's based on a movie that I really loved. The way that the missions are designed is to follow along with the story, and they're all, obviously it's very abstract because it's pinball, it's not a movie anymore, but it does a really good job of abstracting down key points in the movie into events within the pinball table and giving you good scores and rewards for, you know, playing along and doing the various missions.
Don't be afraid. Come on. We won't hurt you. Shh, it's all right. It's okay. Come on out.
Okay, so next up we have the Skyrim table. Again, it's a pack of 3 tables that Zen Studios released based on Bethesda properties. You've got a Fallout table, a Doom table, and a Skyrim table. I've picked the Skyrim table because mechanically it's really pushing the pinball action as far as it can possibly be pushed, and this is actually probably the most complex and most involved table, and the amount of effort that the development team went into to really capturing the essence of Skyrim, the leveling up, the exploration, the combat, all of that's actually present in this pinball table, and that makes it really an exciting one to play. It's a challenging one for different reasons to other pinball games. You've got to worry about your leveling up of your character. It's got RPG-like mechanics that way, and yeah, it follows along with the story of Skyrim and all that. And as somebody who's played Skyrim through 4 or 5 times or thereabouts every time Bethesda releases a new version of Skyrim, I end up playing it from start to finish. So as somebody who's done that, I'm obviously very invested in Skyrim already. So to be able to play through in pinball version is it's a lot of fun. So as you can see in the video here, I'm playing through the very first mission where you survive and escape a dragon attack. And as you can see, that dragon would not be possible in a real physical table, pinball table, and that was what I was talking about earlier. You know, Zen Studios uses these kind of video game-ish elements, these impossible things to do in the real world, to brighten up their games and to make their basic pinball experience interesting to somebody who might not play too many pinball tables and is kind of hooked on modern game mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So there's a good mix there. And as you can see, having escaped the dragon, I am now trying to beat off a soldier who's popped up, and I attack him. You obviously attack him by hitting him with the ball, and try and do it before he hits you enough times that your health bars on the left there run out. And like I said, it's got the full RPG kind of system in there. I just leveled up, as you can see, and you can upgrade different statistics and all that. So all Skyrim, and quite interesting. Next up, we're going back to kind of classic table design this time around. This is Pasha. Pasha is a Zen Studios original, and the reason I've picked this one will not be of any surprise to anybody who knows me, because I am a huge fan of the 1001 Arabian Nights mythology and stories and aesthetics, and the whole exotic Middle East is really appealing to me. The music, the colour, the architecture, the costuming, all of that stuff I love about fantasy Middle East. So Pasha really taps into all of that to really offer you a 1001 Arabian Nights style story without being 1001 Arabian Nights. It's obviously not licensed. Well, there wouldn't be a license because the book's actually well and truly in public domain. But yeah, for whatever reason, they've decided to appropriate the style of 1001 Arabian Nights without actually taking on Sinbad or Aladdin as a topic for their game. But it works. This one is, as you can see, quite classic in design. It has got one little trick in it which I really like when I see it in pinball tables. A couple of physical pinball tables in the real world do it as well. It uses a dual table experience. That genie guy there, he can actually disappear under some events, and within him there's an additional pinball mini game to play out. And you see it in the more advanced pinball tables in the real world, but Zen Studios really makes a habit of those kind of mini games within pinball tables, which is a very modern approach, but still something that's within reason, within the realm of real world pinball experiences. So yeah, Pasha doesn't do too much to break with the physical pinball experience, but again, it presents it. Here you go, you see it right there, the mini game. But it presents it in a very interesting, engaging way, and it has all the music and the colour and the vibrancy that I love from Arabian Nights.
Nice shot.
The lamp is fully charged with magic.
Okay, so next up, I think we're up to 4 or 5. I've lost count already. This one's Moon Knight. Now, I'm not a massive fan of Marvel Comics, and I know that in saying that I've probably just annoyed half the listeners and viewers, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm not. I don't read the comics much, I must admit. I watch the movies. I really love the movies franchises, and I like the TV series. Just finished Punisher the other day, but I'm not a huge fan of actually sitting down to read these comics. I'm not a big fan of the aesthetics they use and all of that. Being a fan of Japanese games and all that, I'm much more a fan of manga style art. But after playing Moon Knight for the first time a long time ago on Zen Studios, Zen Pinball 2 on the PlayStation 3, I then went and actually started to read Moon Knight because I really love this table that much. So that's why I've picked this one in my top 10. It's the only Marvel Studio table. There's a lot of them that you can get, but this is the one I've picked for my top 10. And that's precisely because it actually inspired me to actually go and then find out about this character, who I hadn't really known much about beforehand. Him being not a movie character, though he should be, or at least a TV character. If they can do Punisher and Jessica Jones and all that, they should really give Moon Knight a series of his own. But I digress. I was so inspired by Moon Knight that I read the comics and I really like the character as a result. It's a lot of fun, this table. It does enough to capture, I guess, the appeal of Moon Knight, but it's a really hard kind of character to do a pinball table about, because he's kind of this crazy rich guy that sees himself as a great vigilante, but nobody else kind of does. So he's got a little bit of subversive, meta story in there, which isn't really reflected in the table itself. But it's a well-designed table. It's got good missions. It represents a lot of Moon Knight's most common enemies, which are not ones that you know from many other shows. From many other superhero franchises. So it does enough, and shows off a good character in an interesting way. I haven't played this table for a very long time, so I really am not good at it anymore. I have a really good score back on the PS3.
Times do you beat a guy down before he knows you're better than him?
There it goes down the drain. Hello, anybody home?
Right, so next up we have Family Guy.
Okay,
now,
here we go.
I was a big fan of Family Guy in the earlier series when it was interesting and it was genuinely funny, and it hadn't become stale like it is in recent series, which is unfortunate, I guess, because it would be nice to have it last a long time, but it won't, and its days are probably numbered. But for now, it's still a pretty decent property, and they've done a really good pinball table about it. It captures a lot of the humour. There's an awful lot of sound bites in this one from especially the earlier seasons, which is really great. A lot of the great characters from those earlier seasons show up. There's the chicken, there's all of Peter Griffin's buddies, And as you can see, it's a very bright, colourful, and you know, interesting table design. It's very heavily focused on the ramps, as you can see, which is a certain approach to pinball tables. It's not one that I generally play a lot of. I like more complex designs, but this one, it has a good feel about it when you're hitting the ball around the nice loops that it creates. And yeah, it's just a colourful, bright, well-designed pinball table, which is a lot different to a lot of the other Zen Studios pinball tables, because they deal with often dark material like the Marvel comics or Star Wars or Aliens, and it's nice to have that variety where it's bright and colourful and irreverent. And this one you can actually get really big scores on very easily too, which is good, because you feel good about yourself while you're playing this one. If you're struggling with one of the other pinball tables, you can throw this one on and end up with a pretty good score. So yeah, it's different to the other stuff, which is why I've got it on my list. And as I just mentioned Star Wars a moment ago, let's throw the Star Wars one in that I picked. I picked Han Solo. Now, admittedly, I am absolutely terrible at this table. I think the top score I've ever got on it is something like 2 million points, which sounds like a lot, but anyone who's played a Zen Studios pinball table knows that tends to be on the very low end of scores. I'm not sure if it's just me or it's just a genuinely difficult table to get big scores on, but I find it very hard. That being said, I've thrown it on here because it's a lot of fun. It has that very distinctive, Han Solo bar, when you meet him for the first time in Star Wars. It has that bar music going on in the background. It's got a lot of sound bites which really show off his character being the larrikin that he is, to use the Aussie term, and it's got the Millennium Falcon, which is really cool. Who doesn't like the Millennium Falcon? So it's not the best design table, and I am inclined to believe that the challenge that I myself, and I hope a lot of other people, because otherwise I feel bad for being the only one, the challenge seems to be because it's not particularly well designed, but it's a lot of fun anyway. And yeah, you get to shoot first.
Folky religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blast.
So next up is another Zen Studios one. This time it's Zen Studios licensing itself. Castle Storm is another franchise of Zen Studios, which is a lot of fun, and I really recommend checking it out. It's kind of Angry Birds meets tower defense meets action RPG meets strategy game. It's a whole bunch of different things thrown together with a lot of humor. It's got a great sense of humor about it, and that makes for a really, really good table. So it's the story of knights against Vikings, and you actually do a lot of fighting of Vikings in this one. At the same time, it's got that very cartoony sense of humour to it. And again, it's a really well-designed table where you'll generally feel good, you'll get some good scores, you'll do some interesting stuff every time you play. You'll see there the second table experience. That's actually very easy to get to in this particular table, so you always feel like you're getting somewhere as you play this one, and that's a good thing, because that stops you getting too bored with the table. There's always something happening going on. It's a very kinetic table. There's a dragon, which I guess this one came before the Elder Scrolls one, so I imagine that they probably got the tech for the dragon from this table. And yeah, you'll see soon enough there's there we go, Viking attack, so you get to repel the Vikings by hitting them. They got that from the Plants vs Zombie table, which unfortunately is no longer licensed, so you can't actually play it on the modern versions of Pinball FX 2, but you can play this one still. And yeah, it's good. It's really good. I don't know what else to really say about it, because it's a standard table in some senses, especially by Zen Studios standards, but it's just really enjoyable, and it's really easy to play, and I like it for that.
Back in the day, we didn't have all this fancy stuff.
So now we move to one of the newest tables. This is Jaws. There was a pack of 20th Century Fox tables that Zen Studios released earlier in the year, actually at the same time as Pinball FX 3. And there's Jaws, Back to the Future, and E.T. Of those three, obviously Jaws is my favourite. The reason being probably mostly because Jaws is my favourite film of those three. It's probably as simple as that. I watched it a lot as a youngster. Once my parents decided I was old enough to watch a movie about killer sharks and all of that. And this one I actually find a really interesting table, very different by Zen Studio standards, because in a lot of cases Zen Studio tables are very busy. They have a lot of stuff to do, a lot of places to hit the ball, and everywhere that you hit the ball something ends up happening. But as you can see, this one actually has a lot of space where nothing happens, and that creates that feeling of the ocean and so on. It makes scoring difficult for sure, but it's very thematically appropriate to the Jaws franchise. And despite that simplicity, all the stuff at the back is actually quite complex, because a lot of that stuff actually happens in that back third based on your performance and your abilities at pinball. You'll see in this video clip probably the most impressive of the effects. The bit on the right hand side, which is currently flashing yellow, is going to turn into a pool, and you'll see a shark, like Jaws himself, come out of that water, and the splash effect and all that stuff. And again, it would be impossible to do in a real pinball table, but it's done in a way that's kind of believable in the sense that it doesn't feel like it's too digital, too video gamey. It feels like there's some of that analog expertise that's gone into creating that. And yeah, it's a really cool effect. There we go, bang, splash, and it has that. It's a really cool effect, and the first time I saw it, I got really excited, which probably sounds weird to people who aren't big fans of pinball, but yes, I got very excited about that.
Maybe I should go alone. Real fine stuff. I don't mean a thing to Mr. Whitey, of course. He loves screws and electronics. He was born with what he does best.
And finally, this is a table which is really tragically not available on the modern Pinball FX 3. You can only play it if you have Zen Pinball 2, which is available on PlayStation 4, thank goodness, and also PlayStation Vita, so it is available on current generation platforms. And if you're into pinball and haven't actually played this one yet, I actually recommend going and downloading Zen Pinball 2, assuming it's still available, because yeah, this one is one of the few where the licenses didn't transfer over to Pinball FX 3, but it is actually my very favourite table of all, and it is Ninja Gaiden. Now this is one of the first licensed tables that Zen Studios created, and it's kind of unfortunate that the studio has since worked on almost entirely Western properties, because the two Japanese game developer games that they created, they also created one based on Street Fighter, were actually really good. And it would be great to have, I don't know, just throwing this idea out here, but Hatsune Miku, Sonic, and Yakuza or Persona table in a Sega pack. It'd be great if Zen Studios could somehow work with Sega to create that, because I'd love it. But anyway, Ninja Gaiden 2 is another table which would almost be entirely possible in the physical world. You would almost be able to create this exactly as it is, as a real physical pinball table. And it's actually a very challenging one, you'd hope so. Anything carrying the Ninja Gaiden name should be challenging. Challenging, but also very rewarding, and they have nailed the aesthetic of Ninja Gaiden, that kind of neon glow, and the energy, and the B-grade kind of horror tones, and the sexuality from the characters with big boobs, on the faceplate there. Everything about Ninja Gaiden is just captured perfectly in this table, to the point where you'd almost think that Koei Tecmo was very closely involved in the development of it. So yeah, I still play this, even though I've got Pinball FX 3 on a couple of different platforms now. I still pull out Zen Pinball 2 to play this one from time to time, and yeah, it's my pick of my very favourite. So there we go. That's the 10 pinball tables that I would recommend to newcomers of Zen Studios pinball tables. If you've got a chance to pick up Pinball FX 3, it is a free download for the first part, and then you can buy tables, individually or in small packs as you choose, and give it a go. I love it, and I really recommend everybody play it. Thanks very much for watching this quite long video, and I'll see you at the next one.